In the bitter Montana winds, a man named Ethan stumbled upon an abandoned barn where a girl lay unconscious in a torn jacket in the snow. He took her home, not knowing that this decision would reveal the lies of his past and force him to choose between keeping quiet or fighting for justice, which would cost him everything. The wind howled through the barren trees of Red River, Montana, cutting through the night like a blade. Ethan Collins gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Ford pickup, the tires crunching over fresh snow as he navigated the winding backroads. It was late past 9, and the world outside was a blur of white and shadow, illuminated only by the twin beams of his headlights. At 42, Ethan was no stranger to these brutal winters. A carpenter by trade, he'd spent his life hammering nails and hauling lumber, his hands calloused and his shoulders broad from years of hard work. He liked the solitude of these drives, the quiet that wrapped around him like a blanket after a long day. Red River wasn't much, a speck of a town nestled in the foothills, where everyone knew everyone, but it was home. Tonight, though, something felt off. The air was heavier, the cold sharper, sinking into his bones even with the heater rattling at full blast. He was a mile from his turnoff when his headlights caught a flash of color against the endless white, a streak of red, half buried in a snowbank near an old, sagging barn. Ethan squinted, slowing the truck to a crawl. "What the hell?" he muttered, his breath fogging in the cab. "Trash, maybe. Kids dumping junk again?" But curiosity tugged at him, a nagging itch he couldn't ignore. He killed the engine, the silence rushing in like a tide, and stepped out into the biting wind. His boots sank into the snow as he trudged toward the barn, its weathered boards creaking in the gusts. Up close, the red wasn't trash, it was a jacket. A kid's jacket. Ethan's stomach dropped as he brushed away the snow, revealing a small figure curled beneath it. A girl, no more than 8, her face pale as the drifts around her, lips tinged blue. She wasn't moving. Hey, kid." His voice cracked as he dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he cleared the snow from her face. She was light as a feather, her dark hair matted with ice. He pressed a finger to her neck, faint, but there, a pulse. Alive. "Jesus," he breathed, yanking off his own coat and wrapping it around her. She didn't stir, her lashes fluttering against her cheeks like she was caught in a dream. Ethan scooped her up, her body limp and cold against his chest, and stumbled back to the truck. The cab was still warm as he laid her across the passenger seat, cranking the heat and rubbing her hands between his own. "Come on, kid, wake up," he muttered, glancing at her face. She was pretty, big gray eyes half open now, staring at nothing. Where had she come from? No houses for miles, just forest and snow. A runaway? Lost? Worse? He floored it toward home, the truck fishtailing on the icy road. His place wasn't far, a squat, single-story house at the edge of town, its paint peeling and porch sagging. Inside, it smelled of wood smoke and liniment, the air thick with the weight of years. Aunt Marge was there, hunched in her recliner by the window, a quilt draped over her lap. She'd raised Ethan after his parents died in a car wreck when he was 10, but time hadn't been kind to her. Arthritis had twisted her hands, and a fall 2 winters back had left her legs weak. She was 68 now, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her mouth set in a permanent scowl. "What's that racket?" she snapped as Ethan burst through the door, the girl still in his arms. Her eyes narrowed at the bundle. "Who's that?" "Found her in the snow," Ethan said, kicking the door shut and laying the girl on the couch. Half frozen. "She's alive, but barely." Marge snorted, peering over her glasses. "What's she doing out there? And what's she doing here?" "We in a damn shelter, Ethan. She'd be dead if I left her," he shot back, grabbing a blanket from the armchair and tucking it around the girl. "I couldn't just drive by." Marge muttered something under her breath, probably about him being a soft touch, but didn't argue further. Ethan knelt beside the couch, brushing snow from the girl's hair. Her jacket was torn, too thin for a night like this, and her sneakers were soaked through. Up close, he saw the faint bruising on her wrist, dark, finger-shaped marks that made his jaw tighten. "Hey, kid," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open fully this time, wide and gray, locking onto his. She didn't speak, just stared, her breath shallow. "You're okay," Ethan said, forcing a smile. "You're safe now. What's your name?" "Lila," she whispered, so quiet he almost missed it. "Lila," he repeated. "Good. I'm Ethan. What happened? How'd you end up out there?" She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket tighter, her gaze darting to the window like she expected something or someone to come crashing through. Ethan frowned. "All right, no rush. You rest." He stood, grabbing his phone from the counter. "I'm calling the sheriff. They need to know." "No signal," Marge interrupted, tapping her own ancient flip phone. "Storms knocked it out. Lines are down too." Ethan cursed under his breath, glancing out at the swirling snow. "No help tonight, then." He turned back to Lila, who'd curled into a ball, her eyes still fixed on the dark beyond the glass. Something about her, those marks, that fear, gnawed at him. This wasn't just a lost kid. Something was wrong, bad wrong, and he'd stumbled right into it. "Guess she stays till morning," he said, more to himself than Marge. "Then we figure this out." Marge huffed. "Your funeral, boy. Don't say I didn't warn you when trouble comes knocking." Ethan didn't reply, but as he watched Lila's chest rise and fall, a chill settled in his gut that had nothing to do with the cold. Trouble was already here. He could feel it. The storm raged on outside Ethan's small house in Red River, rattling the windows and piling snow against the door. Inside, the flickering light of a kerosene lamp cast long shadows across the living room. Lila slept fitfully on the couch, her small frame buried under a pile of blankets, her breathing steady but shallow. Ethan sat in a worn armchair nearby, nursing a mug of black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Sleep wouldn't come, and not with the question spinning in his head. Who was this girl? Why was she out there, alone, in the middle of nowhere? And those bruises on her wrist, faint but unmistakable, kept gnawing at him like a splinter he couldn't pull out. Aunt Marge had shuffled off to bed after a string of grumbles, leaving Ethan alone with the quiet and the wind. He glanced at Lila again. She'd murmured something in her sleep, soft, garbled words he couldn't catch, but her face twitched with unease. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and rubbed his stubbled jaw. "What the hell happened to you, kid?" he whispered. Morning broke gray and heavy, the storm finally easing into a dull drizzle. Lila stirred as Ethan stoked the wood stove, the crackle of flames filling the room. She sat up slowly, clutching the blanket, her gray eyes darting around like a cornered animal's. "Hey," Ethan said, keeping his voice low. "You're still safe. Hungry?" She nodded, barely, and he handed her a plate of toast with a smear of peanut butter. Simple, but it was what he had. She ate in silence, picking at the edges, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Lila," he tried again, sitting across from her. "Can you tell me what happened? How'd you end up in that snowbank?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the bread. "I ran," she said at last, her voice a thin thread. "From the bad man." Ethan's chest tightened. "Bad man? Who's that? Your dad? Someone else?" She didn't answer, just stared at the crumbs on her plate. Before he could press further, a sharp knock rattled the door. Ethan stood, frowning. Marge wouldn't be up yet, and no one came out this way unannounced. He opened it to find Sarah Hensley, the town's part-time nurse, bundled in a parka and stomping snow off her boots. Her round face, framed by a knit cap, broke into a tired smile. "Heard you had a visitor," she said, nodding toward Lila. "Marge called me on the landline before it cut out. Said you're playing hero again." "Something like that," Ethan muttered, stepping aside to let her in. Sarah had been a friend since high school, sharp, kind, and one of the few who didn't judge him for sticking around this dead-end town. She knelt by Lila, her tone softening. "Hey, sweetie. I'm Sarah. Mind if I check you over?" Lila shrank back, but didn't resist as Sarah gently examined her pulse, forehead, then her arms. When she pushed up the girl's sleeve, Sarah's smile faded. "Ethan," she said quietly, tilting her head toward the kitchen. He followed, and once they were out of earshot, she whispered, "Those aren't from a fall." Someone grabbed her hard more than once. "She's not just cold, she's scared." Ethan's hands balled into fists. "She said she ran from a bad man." "Won't say more." Sarah's brow furrowed. "We need to tell Sheriff Dawson. This isn't right." "Yeah, soon as the road's clear," Ethan agreed. But before they could plan further, a low rumble cut through the morning, a sleek black SUV pulling up outside, its tires crunching the fresh snow. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a wool coat that screamed money. His hair was slicked back, his jaw set like he owned the place. He strode to the porch with purpose, and Ethan met him at the door, blocking the way. "Morning," the man said, his voice smooth but edged with impatience. "Name's Richard Blake. I'm looking for my daughter. Heard you found a girl out here." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Maybe. Who's your daughter?" "Lila," Blake said, peering past him into the house. 8 years old, dark hair. She wandered off yesterday during a walk. I've been frantic." Ethan glanced back at Lila, who'd frozen on the couch, her toast dropping to the floor. Her eyes were wide, her knuckles white as she gripped the blanket. She didn't look relieved, she looked terrified. Wandered off, Ethan repeated, turning back to Blake. In a blizzard? Miles from anywhere. Blake's smile tightened. Kids, you know how they are. She's always running off. Can I see her? Sarah stepped up beside Ethan, her voice calm but firm. She's shaken up. Maybe we should call the sheriff first, sort this out proper. I don't need the sheriff. Blake snapped, his charm slipping. She's my kid. Hand her over, and we're done here. Ethan crossed his arms, his frame filling the doorway. She's not going anywhere till I'm sure she's safe. She's got bruises, Blake. Care to explain that? Blake's face darkened, but he forced a laugh. She's clumsy. Falls all the time. Look, I don't have time for this. I'm a busy man. Own half the lumber mills around here. You don't want trouble, do you? The threat hung in the air, but Ethan didn't budge. I'll take my chances. Sheriff's on his way. A lie. The phones were still down, but Blake didn't know that. Blake stared him down, then stepped back with a cold nod. Fine. Have it your way. But this isn't over. He turned and stalked back to his SUV, the engine roaring as he peeled out. Sarah let out a breath. That guy's bad news. You know who he is. Heard the name, Ethan said, watching the taillights vanish. Big shot from upstate. Thinks he runs this county. He does, Sarah replied. And he doesn't like being crossed. Ethan looked at Lila, who'd curled into a ball again, her eyes locked on the door. She's not his, he said, more to himself than Sarah. Not with that fear. Something's wrong here. Sarah nodded. Then we'd better figure it out fast, before he comes back with more than words. The room fell silent, save for the wind's low moan. Ethan felt it now. A storm bigger than the one outside was brewing, and he was smack in the middle of it. The morning dragged on in Red River, the sky a dull slate above Ethan's house. Lila stayed close to the wood stove, her small hands clutching a mug of hot cocoa Sarah had made before leaving to check on other patients. The roads were still a mess, but the phone lines flickered back to life, and Ethan had left a message for Sheriff Dawson. No word yet. Aunt Marge sat in her recliner, her sharp eyes flicking between Lila and Ethan, her silence louder than any complaint. The air felt thick, not just with the lingering damp of melted snow, but with something unspoken, something heavy. Ethan paced the kitchen, his mind racing. Richard Blake's visit gnawed at him. The man's polished arrogance, the way Lila shrank at the sight of him. Those bruises weren't from a fall, no matter what Blake claimed. And her words, the bad man, echoed in his head. He stopped by the sink, staring out at the snow-dusted pines. Something about Lila tugged at him, a pull he couldn't name. Her gray eyes, wide and haunted, stirred a memory he'd buried deep. He crossed to a battered trunk in the corner, one he hadn't opened in years. Marge watched him, her brow creasing. What are you digging for now? She grumbled. Something I need to see, Ethan said, lifting the lid. Inside were relics of his past. Old tools, a cracked baseball glove, and a small stack of photos tied with twine. He pulled one free, his breath catching. It was Emily, 18 years old, her russet hair spilling over her shoulders, her smile soft against the backdrop of the river. They'd been kids then, inseparable in that fleeting summer before everything fell apart. Ethan had loved her, clumsy, quiet love he'd never known how to say. She'd vanished after her family moved away, no goodbye, no explanation. He'd heard rumors. Her folks hit hard times, sold their land, but nothing solid. Life moved on, and he'd let her fade. Until now. He studied Lila, then the photo, then Lila again. The eyes, those same gray eyes, sharp and deep. The stubborn tilt of her chin. His heart thudded, a wild, impossible thought taking root. Could she be? The phone rang, shrill against the quiet. Ethan grabbed it, his voice tight. Yeah. Ethan, it's Dawson. The sheriff's gravelly tone came through. Got your message. What's this about a kid? Found her in the snow last night, Ethan said, keeping his eyes on Lila. Half dead. Says she ran from someone. Then this guy, Richard Blake, shows up claiming she's his. She's scared stiff of him, Sheriff. And she's got bruises. A pause. Blake, huh? Big fish. Runs the mills up north. You sure you want to poke that bear? Not about wanting, Ethan said. About what's right. Dawson sighed. All right. I'll look into it. Keep her there, till I get out your way. Storm's still clogging things up. Ethan hung up, the photo still in his hand. Lila glanced at him, curious, and he knelt beside her. Lila, he said softly, your mom, What's her name? She hesitated, then whispered, Emily. The room tilted. Ethan's grip tightened on the photo, his pulse hammering. Emily what? Emily Harper, she said, barely audible. But she's gone. Gone. His voice cracked. What do you mean, gone? Lila's lip trembled. She told me to run. Said he'd hurt me again if I stayed. Who? Ethan pressed, though he already knew. The bad man, she said, curling tighter into herself. He's not my dad. He just says he is. Ethan's mind reeled. Emily Harper, his Emily, alive, out there somewhere, tied to this mess. And Lila. He stood, shoving the photo into his pocket, a fire igniting in his chest. If she was Emily's daughter, and Blake wasn't her father, then who was? The thought hit him like a freight train, stealing his breath. That summer, their last night by the river, nervous kisses, fumbling closeness in the dark. It had been quick, awkward, a secret they'd never spoken of after. 9 months later, she was gone. 8 years ago, Lila was born. He stumbled to the porch, the cold air slapping his face. Was it possible? Was Lila his? The dates lined up, the resemblance screamed it. But if she was, why hadn't Emily told him? And why was Blake here, lying through his teeth? Marge's voice cut through his haze. You look like you've seen a ghost, boy. Maybe I have, he muttered, staring at the horizon. Blake's threat lingered. This isn't over, and now it felt personal. If Lila was his daughter, he'd fight tooth and nail to keep her safe. But first, he needed answers. Emily was out there, and he'd find her, no matter what it took. Inside, Lila watched him, her gray eyes mirroring his own. The past wasn't done with Ethan yet. It had just walked back into his life, small and scared, and it was about to change everything. The afternoon sun hung low over Red River, casting weak light through the pines as Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the old photo of Emily crumpled in his fist. Lila napped on the couch, her small snores a fragile anchor in the storm brewing inside him. If she was his daughter, then Richard Blake's claim was a lie, and Emily's disappearance tied it all together. Ethan's gut churned with anger and guilt. 8 years lost, and now this. He needed proof, and he needed it fast. The phone rang, jolting him upright. It was Mike Tanner, an old high school buddy turned small-time journalist for the county paper. Heard you're in deep, man, Mike's voice crackled through. Sheriff's buzzing about some kid and Blake. What's up? Ethan spilled it. The snowbank, Lila's fear, Blake's threats, and the bombshell about Emily. Mike whistled low. Blake's a shark. Owns half the lumber trade upstate. Greased palms all over. You sure about this? Sure as I've ever been, Ethan said, his jaw tight. Can you dig? Anything on Blake or Emily Harper? Give me a day, Mike replied. I'll call. Hours later, Sheriff Dawson rolled up in his mud-splattered cruiser. He was a wiry man, late 50s, with a permanent squint from too many years in the sun. Talk to Blake, he said, leaning against the porch rail. Says Lila's his, got papers to prove it. You holding her here's a problem, Ethan. She's terrified of him, Ethan shot back. Bruises don't lie. And I think she's mine. Dawson raised an eyebrow. Yours? That's a hell of a claim. Got evidence? Not yet, Ethan admitted. But I will. The sheriff sighed. I'll stall Blake, but he's pushing for custody. Get your ducks in a row, quick. That night, Ethan barely slept, haunted by Emily's face and Lila's whispered, run. At dawn, Mike called back. Jackpot, he said, breathless. Blake's dirty, tax evasion, shady deals. And Emily? She's in Idaho, hiding out. Married Blake 6 years ago, left him last month. Word is, he's a control freak, kept her locked down. I've got an address. Ethan's heart leapt. Idaho. Yeah. And Ethan, watch your back. Blake's got eyes everywhere. He scribbled the address, then dialed it from the landline. After 3 rings, a shaky voice answered. Hello. Emily. Ethan's throat tightened. It's Ethan. From Red River. A gasp, then silence. Ethan, how? Lila, he said. I found her. She's here. Safe. Is she? Yes. Emily cut in, her voice breaking. She's yours. That night by the river. I didn't know till after I left. My folks forced me out, said you'd never take me back. Then Blake came along, promised to fix everything. He didn't know Lila wasn't his till she was 4. That's when it started, the yelling, the hitting. I told her to run when he lost it last week. Ethan's hands shook. Why didn't you tell me? I was scared, she whispered. Still am. He'll kill me if he finds me. He won't, Ethan vowed. I'm coming for you. And I'm keeping Lila. He hung up, resolve hardening like steel. But trouble came first. At dusk, flames licked the sky, his tool shed ablaze. Ethan ran out, fire extinguisher in hand, but it was too late. The shed collapsed, a charred warning. Blake's doing, no doubt. Neighbors gawked, but no one saw a thing. Sheriff Dawson arrived, shaking his head. No proof, Ethan. Could be an accident. It's not, Ethan growled. He's scared. Then fight smart, Dawson said. File for custody. Get a lawyer. I'll back you with what I can. Ethan nodded, fueled by fury and purpose. He called a lawyer in town, Ellen Price, a bulldog in a pantsuit, and laid out everything. Lila's bruises, Emily's story, Blake's threats. Ellen grinned. We've got a case. DNA test will seal it. Let's drag this bastard through the courts. Days later, Mike emailed a bombshell, bank records tying Blake to illegal logging, enough to spark an investigation. Ethan gave it to Dawson, who grunted. This might stick. Then he drove to Idaho, heart pounding. Emily met him at a rundown motel, her face thinner, her eyes older, but still hers. She hugged him, tears soaking his shirt. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. We'll fix it, he promised. Together. Back in Red River, Ellen filed the custody claim. Blake roared into town, lawyers in tow, but Ethan stood firm. The fight was on, legal, clean, and relentless. He'd protect Lila, bring Emily home, and make Blake pay. No more running. The courtroom in Red River buzzed with tension, a rare spectacle for the sleepy town. Ethan sat rigid in a stiff wooden chair, his hands clasped tight to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Richard Blake lounged with his high-priced lawyer, his smug grin a stark contrast to the storm in Ethan's chest. Lila was safe with Aunt Marge at home, but her absence weighed heavy, everything hinged on today. Emily sat beside him, her fingers brushing his arm, a quiet strength in her eyes. She'd come back with him from Idaho, ready to face Blake and the past. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, banged her gavel, silencing the murmurs. Ellen Price stood, her voice cutting through the room. Your Honor, we're here to prove Ethan Collins is Lila Harper's biological father and sole rightful guardian. We have DNA evidence, testimony of abuse, and a pattern of intimidation by Mr. Blake. She slid a folder across the bench, test results, photos of Lila's bruises, Mike's bank records. This man's not fit to raise a child. Blake's lawyer countered, smooth as oil. Mr. Blake's a respected businessman. These accusations are slander. The girl's is by marriage, and Mr. Collins has no legal standing. The judge peered at the DNA report, then at Ethan. Mr. Collins, your statement? He stood, throat dry. Lila's mine. I didn't know till she landed in my life, half frozen and scared. Emily told me the truth. Blake's hurt them both. I've got no fancy words, just facts. She's my daughter, and I'll protect her. He won't. Emily went next, her voice trembling but firm. I hid Lila's father from Blake because he'd have destroyed us. When he found out she wasn't his, he turned cruel. I told her to run to save her. Ethan's her real dad. He's who she needs. Blake took the stand, all charm and lies. Emily's unstable. I gave them everything. This is a setup by a jealous ex. But the cracks showed. Mike's evidence, tax fraud, illegal logging hit hard. Dawson testified about the shed fire, hinting at Blake's involvement without proof. The judge called a recess, and Ethan paced the hall, Emily at his side. We've got him, she whispered. I feel it. Hours later, the gavel fell. Custody granted to Ethan Collins, the judge declared. Mr. Blake, you're under investigation for child endangerment and financial crimes. Bailiff, detain him. Blake's face twisted as cuffs clicked on, his lawyer scrambling. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding him. Emily hugged him, tears streaking her cheeks. It's over, she said. Outside, townsfolk clapped, word had spread, and Blake's fall was Red River's victory. Ethan drove home, Emily beside him, the weight of years lifting. Lila ran out, throwing her arms around them. I knew you'd win, Daddy, she said, her smile bright. Ethan's heart swelled. He hadn't heard that word before, and it fit like a glove. That night, the house glowed with warmth. Marge, softened by the ordeal, baked an apple pie, her hands shaky but determined. Guess I'm a great aunt now, she muttered, a rare grin breaking through. They ate together, Ethan, Emily, Lila, Marge, laughter filling the air where silence once reigned. Lila drew a picture at the table, a family under a big sun, stick figures holding hands. This is us, she said, beaming. Later, Ethan stepped onto the porch, the stars sharp against the Montana sky. Emily joined him, her shoulder brushing his. I should have told you back then, she said softly. I thought I was protecting you. You're here now, he replied, taking her hand. That's enough. The next day, Dawson called. Blake's empire was crumbling, arrest pending. Justice rolled in slow but sure, no vengeance needed. Ethan rebuilt the shed with Lila's help, her small hands passing nails as she chattered about school. Emily found work at the clinic with Sarah, piecing her life back together. They weren't perfect, scars lingered, trust took time, but they were a family, forged through fire. One evening, as snow dusted the ground, Ethan watched Lila chase Marge's old cat across the yard, Emily laughing beside him. He'd spent years alone, hauling lumber and guilt, thinking happiness wasn't his to claim. Now it was. Blake faced consequences, Lila was safe, and Emily was home. The fight had been long, but the win was theirs, fair, legal, and final. For the first time, Ethan felt whole.